Hi there, and now in this video we're going to start coding our to-do application and writing tests for it using Angular testing library, Karma, and Jasmine. First thing, just create a component named task form. For that, use your terminal and type out the command nggc task form. Okay, so this command created files for our component and updated app.module so our component would be registered in our Angular application. Because this video is about testing, I'm not going over CSS I'm writing. I'm just going to throw here some CSS to make it look a little bit better. Here we go. And let's write our form. So we need a form with form wrapper class. This is from our CSS. We don't need action on that. We need a label for new task. We're going to have an input here with a class input text and ID new task. And let's also have the label for the submit button. Input type submit, value add, class submit button. Let's also bind this value to ng model named task name, and this is our form. Now let's use a command ng-test. This will run Karma and it will run our application. Okay, so our Karma test runner is running. We already have one failure here. Let's look at it. First, let's go to task form component spec.ts. So this is what Angular creates for us when it creates a component, creates spec.ts. It doesn't do a lot of testing here. It's a boilerplate code. We're not going to need this in our testing because we're using Angular testing library. This we do need. We are declaring everything we're using in a component when we're configuring a testing module. This is what it calls. It's a test bed. It has the method configure testing module. It works the same way as it works with your app generally. Whenever you're using ng model in your Angular application, if you go to app module, you would see that we have here forms module. This is what we need to import in our spec.ts file as well. Because whenever we run tests for our components, we need to specify what we're using there, what components. If you're using some components, you need to declare it. If you're importing something, like if you're using something from forms module, you need to import it in your test as well. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do imports forms module. Now we're saving this, and the failure is gone now. That failure is gone now. The expected component to be true, the test fails, but we don't need this test actually. Save again. We have no failing test, and now we can write tests of our own. And the only boilerplate we need here is this. We don't need this. Okay, so now let's start coding with Angular testing library. For that, we need to render our component. And to render our component, we would need to import this method from Angular testing library. So let's do that. Import render from Angular testing library. Now we're doing const component, declaring render, and passing here our task form component. Okay, a few things to note here. Cannot find module Angular testing library. Oh, okay, my bad. It's actually testing library Angular. Because testing library actually exists for React and other frameworks as well, so not the point. So actually what happens here, it's going to render our form component. It's going to return us a bunch of methods so we can test our component. But to mention here, the function is async. So method, this function render is asynchronous. So we need to await it before we can do anything else. And whenever we're using await, this expression is only allowed with an async function, so we can write here async and all that is gone. So let's just write here a very simple basic test, see what happens, see what goes on, and we can go then further from here in the next videos. Let's just make sure whatever we type into a component is reflected in that input. Input should have the value we typed into. Okay, so what Angular testing library would return to us in this component is the method type, one of the method. We can see it here, component type. Now we're passing here what we need to type into. In Angular testing library, you can grab elements by a few other options. You can grab by label, you can grab by some other element. Let's just see component get. You can see you can get by test ID, get by text, by title, by display value, by role. There are quite a few. See what fits you best. I like doing test ID and I'll show you what that is in a minute. So let's just write it, get by test ID, new task, and the second value is a string what we should type into. So let's say task number 1. Let's save this, see what happens. We get a failed test now because, first of all, let's deal with this error. Every time you use ng model within a form tag, it has to have a name. So let's just do that and fix this error quickly. Okay, we fixed this. Now, unable to find element data test ID new task. To do that, we can expose this element to our testing library by using a test ID, and that is data test ID task name. I quite like test IDs because it's very obvious what it's used for. It's for testing. It's better than grabbing elements by class name or by IDs because class names and IDs can change, and test ID is very obvious about its role, about its purpose. Now let's save this. New task. Okay, so now all of our tests passed, but we don't really test anything. Let's test what value it has. Let's refactor this into another variable. Let task name equal this. Task name. Now we're using Jasmine methods as expect. We're passing some value here, and this value would be component get by test ID new task, and we're accessing value property on that component, and we're expecting it to be task name. Let's see if our test pass. Okay, we get an error. This is a TypeScript error actually. It tells us that property value doesn't exist on type HTML element. So what happens here is component get by test ID returns you a value that is specified as HTML element, and not all HTML elements have value property on them. What you can do is you can specifically tell that we know what we're doing and we're expecting HTML input element, and that actually does have value on it, so we won't get this red squiggly error. Okay, so this is it for now. This is our application. It has task number 1 in the input that we've typed with our test utility. We created a spec expectation that what we've typed is the same value input has. In the next videos, we're going to test that adding our tasks work, that our tasks are saved in local storage, that we can render items from local storage, that we can re-render items when we add new elements, that items from local storage get rendered when app initially loads, and all of that stuff. I hope this helps, and that's all for now.